this is my initial reaction, initial thoughts. I don't know what anyone thought of that episode. I've got an idea, but I don't know. I haven't seen any other reactions. Similarly to last week, it's very late or early in the morning. It's about 2:30 in the morning for me now. I just watched it, finished about 5 minutes ago, maybe 5-10 minutes ago. And if you watched my reaction the video I did last week for the Star Beast, my initial thoughts of that, you'll know that my initial reaction to that episode was largely not very positive. I don't want to say it was a negative reaction, but it didn't quite land for me last week. I have watched that episode again during the week. I'm going to save my thoughts as from that rewatch till I do the full review later on, once we have all 3 episodes. But you'll know that my initial reaction last week was I didn't really love it. A lot of people did, which was good to see. But last week it didn't quite land for me on an initial viewing. That being said, I was still very much intrigued by this episode. I was very much looking forward to this episode because we knew nothing about it. It had been filmed entirely within the studio, basically, and it had been hyped up so much as, an episode unlike anything Doctor Who's ever done before, and it's really weird, and, the things that they're doing is like, how on earth are we ever going to manage that? And I've got to say, I think it lived up to all of the hype that surrounded it. It was something that I didn't want to overhype it in my head too much. There'd been a lot of hype, a lot of teasing about what this episode was going to be, because we had no idea. And that really intrigued me. And for a long time, it's been the episode of the 3 that I've been the most intrigued by and the most excited for, because of how little we knew about it. And that has remained true until recently. Up until, now, basically, I kind of knew what to expect with last week's, to a certain extent. And similarly, I feel like I have an idea of what next week's will be. I'm sure it will surprise me, but we knew nothing about this episode. And I thought it was pretty great. I think it is something unlike the show has ever done before. And I've seen a sentiment I've seen more recently in the past couple of weeks, and in the past week especially. Because for a long time, I think people thought that this second episode was going to feature lots of cameos, and it would be the one where you get the old Doctors back and stuff. Because it was filmed all in studio, so there's lots of surprises there, and people who filmed who we don't know, we didn't see them on location and stuff like that. And I think that had been the expectation for quite a while. More recently, though, I think people have started to realise maybe it isn't going to be that. Maybe these people aren't going to be in it. Maybe it's not going to be Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi in this episode. And they've started going, actually, what I'd love is the next Midnight, the next Heaven Sent, an episode that really delves into the characters. And that's exactly what this was. And I can definitely see this episode going down as, on the same level as episodes like Midnight and Heaven Sent and stuff like that. I think it's probably going to be the standout of the 3. Obviously, we don't know about the giggle, but I suspect that while Blue Yonder will be the standout. And I think it was just so a great piece, a great episode for David and Catherine as performers. and I think they both did fantastically. I think I can't remember if I know I mentioned last time that I wasn't a massive fan of Donna as a character, and I may have been a little bit. I can't remember if I basically said that I didn't massively rate Catherine Tate as a performer. I do think she's very good, but sometimes I think she can be quite broad, and you know, the performance in the last episode mostly worked, but some of it didn't, and I find that a lot with the character of Donna. But then you get an episode like this where Catherine Tate proves how good she really is, and David Tennant especially. Catherine Tate is good, but David Tennant is just on another level in this episode. I think he's fantastic. He's always been good at playing villains and villainous characters. We've seen that in his other work. I'm thinking of stuff like Jessica Jones and Inside Man. He became sort of villainous in that. I'm sure there's other things I can't think of off the top of my head, but we know he's good at that sort of stuff, and it was great to see him lean into that in this episode. And yeah, I really reacted to this in a way that I kind of didn't for the last episode. I don't want to keep going back to oh well, this was way better than last week's, because lots of people loved last week's, and my opinions on that episode have changed somewhat in the week since. But this episode really, it was scary, it was thrilling, it was unique, and it was really interesting, a great test for the Doctor as a character, and I think that's fantastic. I think it is the next Midnight, it is the next Heaven Sent, you know. And it looked mostly pretty good. Some of the big CGI corridor, the big CGI hallway. Spoilers, but I'm assuming you know that I'm going to spoil the episode. The big CGI long corridor didn't entirely work for me, but it wasn't awful. And I was impressed by the ambition of it. Similarly with the the creatures that are copying the Doctor and Donna in this, I thought that that sequence didn't quite come together, but it was fairly decent. And again, I respect the ambition of trying to do something like that. I really enjoyed this, and I have no doubt in my mind, as I say, I don't know what other people thought of this, but I have no doubt in my mind that it has gone down very, very positively. It was also, if you recall, again from the last week's reaction, you'll know I talked a lot about the Jodie Whittaker, Chris Chibnall era, and the fact that I'm a big fan of that era. It was so great to see a continuation of the Doctor's character in regards to stuff like the Timeless Child and like the Flux. We knew that it was going to get addressed. It had been mentioned before that it was going to be addressed in this. And I think myself and I think a lot of other people thought that it might just be sort of an offhanded, just a little line off, you know. And it wasn't going to mean anything, but it was a big sequence for the Doctor, and the fact that there's the revelations of the Timeless Child and of the stuff that happened in the Flux, that's still with him. It's still, you know, the fact he has this sequence where all that is brought to light and he has to face it, and then he goes and does the scream. You remember when we saw that scream in the trailer and we thought, oh my god, what could that be? And it was just a moment of pure emotion, and I love that he did that. He had that little outburst and then steadied himself, calmed himself, and said, "Good." And he was like, "I've got that out of my system. Let's carry on." And I would have liked, because that again gets brought up near the end of the episode, I would have liked if he'd opened up a little bit more to Donna about the things that's happened to him since then. It would have been nice to hear him talk specifically, not go through every episode that's happened since then, but talk about certain specific things. Talk about the Day of the Doctor, talk about Heaven Sent and the hybrid, and talk about, the stuff with Gallifrey and the Flux and Jodie Whittaker's era. Don't go too into depth, but bring it up and talk to her about it, I just really liked it. I think this will probably be a much shorter video, because with last week's, it didn't land for me, and I was trying to work out why, and I was trying to think, what did I like and what did I not like, and I was trying to word it in a very specific way, whereas this time my immediate reaction is very positive, and so I don't have much to say other than it was great. But I thought it was great, and I think a lot of the specifics I want to go into in more of a full review, probably. But it was, I very much enjoyed this episode. I think it lived up to the hype. It's a shame that we're not going to see any classic Doctors returning. I mean, yeah, maybe, but we had that with the Power of the Doctor, and if an episode like this is what we're going to get instead, I'm happy with an episode like this. Because I think it was just an episode like this that delves into the Doctor's character in a way you don't normally see. Doesn't come around very often, and that's good, because you don't want an episode like this every week. But I just thought it was a fantastic concept from Russell. Really creepy. Those villains, those creatures were really creepy. They said it was scary, and maybe it was the fact I was watching it at like 1:30 in the morning. But it was tense. It was kind of scary. And some of the weird, almost body horror they did with those creatures was very interesting. And yeah, it was. I'm very impressed by this. I'm impressed by the fact that it was hyped up so much and it delivered on that hype, whilst being its own, whilst not being an episode that had loads of cameos and all this other stuff that you might expect from an anniversary story. But it delivered on what it was hyped up to be, and that's very impressive. I think I didn't care for the bit at the start. I thought that was going to pay off, and perhaps it will next week. The stuff with Isaac Newton and the gravity-mavity joke, which was interesting, because it happened that cold open, and I'm like, what was that? What was the point? And then Donna just says Mavity in conversation, and the Doctor says it again, but then the third time he says gravity and then corrects to Mavity. So my guess is it might be that's got to be an ongoing thread, right? That's got to be maybe into Shooty's first season, maybe, I don't know, but you can't actually leave that. You can't just change a word in the English language and never address that again. But that was an interesting sort of running little quirk throughout it. But what I also loved about this episode is that things are starting to grow on me now. That new TARDIS definitely starting to grow on me. That title sequence, I still don't love it, but it is growing on me. I'm getting more used to it. And stuff like that. I thought that Murray's music in this was, it worked a lot more for me than in the previous episode. The final note I'll say, because obviously this episode ends with an appearance from Bernard Cribbins as well. I didn't mention this last week because I hadn't seen anyone else's reactions, but obviously in the previous episode we learn about Wilf being in sort of sheltered accommodation. He's being looked after by UNIT. We see that the Doctor thinks he's dead at one point and mourns him, and they go, no, he's fine. But obviously he doesn't show up in that episode. And throughout the week I sent a couple of people saying, maybe we saw him filming, but maybe they cut him out since he passed because he wasn't able to finish his stuff, or we don't know. I found that very odd that people were saying that, because we knew he was in these specials. I did pick up, I don't always pick up Doctor Who magazine, but I did pick up the one that released, the one that came out after Bernard Cribbins passed away, and there was a sort of a tribute and a piece from Russell T Davies in that issue about Bernard Cribbins, and he mentioned in that yes, he's in these specials, you're going to see him again. And the other reason why I was pretty certain that Wilf was not, Bernard Cribbins would not be cut out of these specials, he was going to show up, is quite simply because the Star Beast did not end with a credit to him, a tribute, and this episode did, which was obviously lovely to see, but it was something that kind of intrigued. I was like, no, of course they're going to tribute, they're going to dedicate the episode to him. That's why he's not in that first, not that that's why he's not in it, but that is, even though he's not in this first episode, he's going to show up, because if they just had to cut him out, they'd tribute the episode to him, and they didn't last week, but they did this week because he's in it. I assume he'll show up again next week, maybe, and again will be dedicated to, perhaps. I don't know. I'm assuming he'll show up a little bit. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the giggle. Not the giggle, on Wild Blue. I need to go to bed. On Wild Blue Yonder. I look forward to the giggle. That reaction from me may come out on the evening, Saturday evening, because I'm not. Previously, I've been working. Yes, both days the episodes have come out. This one and the last one, I've been working during the evening, so I've only been able to watch the episode later on and get the reaction up for the Sunday. But I will be able to watch the giggle live, so hopefully I should be able to get my reaction up that evening, because again I'm intending on going straight to record my reaction before looking at anyone else's reactions or thoughts. So expect that next Saturday, or maybe next Sunday, we'll see. But yeah, let me know what you thought of Wild Blue Yonder. Did you enjoy it? Did you prefer it to the Star Beast? Did you prefer the Star Beast? Are you excited for the giggle? All those things. And like, comment, subscribe, please. All those things. I had a great time with this episode, and I'm very glad. I think I said last week that that first episode didn't land for me, and that was a shame. But if this second episode also doesn't land for me, then I'm going to really start to worry about my own personal enjoyment with the show. I think I said that in some form or another. So I'm very, very glad to have enjoyed this episode. I'm glad that it worked for me. I had a really fun time with it. yes, that is my reaction. Those are my thoughts. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. And I will see you next week for my reaction to the giggle.